Welcome to From Stardust to Us, in depth conversations with thought leaders, artists, and spiritual activists, navigating the challenges of our times with integrity, joy, and purpose. I'm Bernice Marie Daly.
And I'm Linnell Hayden. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate our listeners. You can find us on YouTube, Buzzsprout, or any place where podcasts are found. If you enjoy our conversation, please help us reach more people by subscribing, liking, and commenting. So let's get into this week's conversation. So we are thrilled to have Carolyn Baker with us today. Carolyn Baker, Ph.D., was a psychotherapist in private practice for 20 years and a professor of psychology and history for 10. She is the author of 15 books, including Navigating the Coming Chaos, a handbook for inner transition, Sacred Demise, Walking the Spiritual Path of Industrial Civilization's Collapse, and Love in the Age of Ecological Apocalypse. She has also co-authored 4 books with Andrew Harvey. She manages her website at www.carolynbaker.net. And that's Carolyn with a Y, Carolyn Baker.net, and publishes a subscription-based daily news digest, which is a collection of news stories and inspiration focusing on the global crisis and options for navigating disruptive times. Carolyn offers life coaching and spiritual counseling worldwide for people who want to help with dealing with the unprecedented challenges of our time. Carolyn can be reached at carolyn@carolynbaker.net. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
Welcome.
Carolyn, I have attended one of your workshops in Boulder. I've watched many of your YouTube videos, read your books, attended a couple of your online courses, and you delve into many subjects that deal with our changing, chaotic, disruptive times and how we might better navigate in a more positive manner into the future. There's one subject that has really stuck with me, and that is the coming of age rites of passage that our ancients and the indigenous, and even some indigenous, have retained that tradition today, and how we've lost that in our modern Western culture, and the dire negative effects that has had, or potentially could have, on our society and moving forward. And when we do have these rites of passage, it seems like we don't know their rites of passage. They just come as a surprise and maybe have a negative effect. So I wanted to see if, I know it's a big subject, but if you could just explain to our listeners what these coming of age rituals and rites of passage were in ancient times, and the positive effect, the necessary reason for having these rituals, and how they differ from what we have today.
Thank you so much for that question. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. Centuries ago, the ancients, or people maybe not so ancient, maybe just a few hundred years ago, particularly in indigenous cultures, practiced rites of passage. And one of the most important things to understand about it is that children were prepared for this from birth. And so when they entered these rites of passage, say at 12 or 13, puberty age, it wasn't a cultural shock or a physical shock. It was, oh yeah, I've been told about this and I know it's going to be difficult, but all of my ancestors, my elders, have been preparing me for it. So it was a rite of passage in which the older men would take the boys, the older women would take the girls, and they would generally do something in nature by themselves that involved an ordeal. There was some kind of test or ordeal that they had to pass. Now, the elders might have been, fairly close, within earshot, but the initiate, the young person, had to do this themselves. And what it forced them to do was to reach down inside themselves and discover the resources they didn't know they had. They had to go into the deeper inner self, the authentic self, to gather the resources they need emotionally and spiritually. And then they were doing this in nature. They weren't doing it in the middle of some village. They were doing it in nature. So their connection with nature and their connection with their inner world were the most useful and powerful tools that they had to get them through this ordeal. And we have to remember, an ordeal like that was always a brush with death. You know, if you're out there, just the fact of being out there overnight by yourself, you're exposed to all the elements, wild animals, who knows what. So it's a whole risky behavior kind of thing that there was no guarantee you were going to survive. And sometimes they didn't. So what was the point of all this? The point of all this was to discover who you are, to discover those inner resources, and to really experience that on a cellular level, so that you weren't pretending that you were growing up. Your life was profoundly changed as a result of this ordeal and this celebration. There was a celebration when you returned, because the village recognized how important this was for you and for them. You're doing it not just for you, but for them. And so there's a huge celebration when you return. There's dancing, there's feasting, and from this ordeal and this rite of passage, you can then take your place in the community. And during the initiation, elders often talked with the young person about their skills, their talents. You know, like, I can see from observing you all these years that you are really good at. I've noticed that you are a very compassionate person, and it seems like in the community you could be XYZ. So it was not only the experience of growing up, but finding your place in the community and being able to use your gifts and talents accordingly. That's a little snapshot of a rite of passage. Now, are we going to talk about, well, I can go ahead and talk about how this applies to us now. Is that okay?
Sure, love that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we don't have these rituals today, obviously. A few indigenous cultures do, but mostly we don't have them. So what happens when you don't have them? Well, on one level, you never really grow up. Because you've never had that brush with death experience surrounded by elders, held by a community. There are what we call failed initiations in our world today, where young people might have gang initiations that I believe try to psychologically take the place of a real initiation. There are all kinds of daring behaviors that gangs go through, which they call initiations, but they're not ordeals. They might be brushes with death, but they're not ordeals that cause you to really experience your inner self for the first time. And you're certainly not supported by anyone. One ordeal that I heard of recently, and I don't know if they're still doing it, they probably are, but some gang in Chicago said, okay, I want you to take your car and you go sit in the fast lane of a freeway at midnight with your lights off and see if you survive. And boy, if you survive, you really got juju, you got something special, you know? and we can respect you as a man.
It seems
I've
like those
often,
rites, sorry, I
what?
was just wanted to interject. It seems like those rites of passage are entirely based on ego, where in the past
Exactly.
it's a
Yeah,
crumbling of the ego.
exactly. And there is no connection with your deeper inner self.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
That's okay. No worries. Um, Now, for the young women, I'm not as familiar with some of their ordeals. They had to go through ordeals for sure in nature by themselves. And there's one tribe, Southwest tribe that I saw recently that, they still have the young woman sitting in a tent by herself and grinding corn at all hours of the night. And, it's a strenuous kind of thing. And it's a really beautiful ceremony from what I've seen. But, mostly young women today don't have anything close to that. And I've often thought that, you know, accidentally getting pregnant is a form of initiation. It's a failed initiation, but it is a test, very inappropriate test of one's womanhood to to have to go through that without the blessing of the community and the support, and it's not intentional, it's accidental. So these are some of my thoughts about it, some of the things I've written about. And then what I want to take, the next level that I want to take this to is what I've written about quite a bit, is that even though we don't have these formal initiation ceremonies today, Carl Jung said that initiation is an archetype. It's something we're born with. It's a thought or a theme that we are born with, and that something in us is wired for it. And so that if we don't have it, we've missed a big piece in our development. And that kind of handicaps us as we go into adulthood. And he also spoke about how, he had traveled around to many of the indigenous cultures in the world because he was really fascinated with the whole idea of initiation. And he came back to Europe and said, we don't have formal initiations in our culture, but what we do have is everyday ordeals. We have losses and we have setbacks in our lives that are like initiations because they present us with the choice of, are you going to connect with your deeper self and all of your emotional and spiritual tools to walk through this? Or are you going to pretend it isn't happening? Or are you going to try to deal with it in some failed way? Some way that really misses the point. And I would say to all of us that this is what our lives are now in these turbulent times. We have initiations every day, every week, every year. And, these are opportunities, we call them growth experiences, but they're opportunities to go within, gather those resources that we have developed within ourselves and the support of our community so that we can walk through these experiences together. And as
Yeah.
we know, there are gazillions of failed initiations around us,
Yeah.
gazillions of things that promise you can get through this. If you buy the right car, if you take the right medications, if you have the right exercise routine, if you make enough money, quack, quack, blah, blah.
All external.
Yeah, yeah.
So this reminds me, uh, pretty pretty parallel. It seems that while we don't really have these wonderful rituals for our young people growing into adulthood or any number of stages that we all go through,
Right.
we seem to be dealing with an ordeal on planet Earth that is life-threatening to everybody, certainly to us.
Yeah.
And so, the spiritual resource, the energy inside that we move through this, to come out and have survived the ordeal, but also then to move into the life, as you said, to come through that and then to say, oh, I think I can give my life to X, Y, or Z. Um, it seems pretty daunting, and that's a word I think you like, actually. It seems pretty daunting that, well, we don't do it, in our close communities or families or associations so much, and the religious traditions have sort of a very mediocre process of sort of marking something, moving into
Right.
adulthood. Um, wow, we got this big thing going on the planet for the whole species, in effect. Um, you have a ritual for that?
Probably thousands, and we need to,
Yeah, I was,
yeah,
I was,
we need to develop our own,
yeah.
yeah, with each other. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it's the constant, attending to our daily practices that take us inside, whether that's meditation, whether that's contemplative prayer, whatever that might be, and to develop that part of ourselves, that inner self that is truly sacred, and also to do that with the support of a community, to do that helping each other in facing these ordeals, knowing together that this inner work is what makes it possible, and the support of each other is what makes it possible as well.
Even in adulthood, we have many opportunities presented to us for the sort of dismantling of the ego and connection within and into the greater community. The problem is these come as a shock and a surprise, such as, maybe a bankruptcy or divorce or some sort of health issue. And it's not something we're prepared for. It's not something that the community or sometimes even your own family supports. It's just too difficult for even those around you. And so it's the temptation to sink into levels of despair and anger and resentment are so great. And I was thinking this might be why spirit or the universe, whatever word you're comfortable with, keeps giving you these kind of repetitive situations in your life. It's like, okay, here you go again. I think it was Einstein or somebody said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Well, that's individually as well.
Yeah.
Where you find yourself, oh, wait, I did this 10 years ago. Maybe the people around me are a little different, but so,
So it's really inviting us to develop an attitude of every day there's some sort of initiation. And it might be a little one or it might be a big one. But this is our life. This is what being a human being is, is having these daily initiations of some sort and then walking through them with the practices that we know that have helped us in the past and with the support of others. That's adult life. And very few people know that.
Right. And it can take a lifetime for you to figure it out on your own if you are on your own.
Yeah.
And perhaps, I've been thinking about this and I'd love to hear your view. Perhaps when we find ourselves in these repetitive situations, it's not so much what we do, but how we do it, how we walk through it.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Without fear and, just realizing that we live in a very fluid physical universe. Things come and go, people, pets, things, houses, there's nothing that we can hang on to forever and just let it come and go.
Except what's inside.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I wouldn't say walking through it without fear, because we're human and we will be fearful. These are scary situations sometimes. But that's where the support of others comes in. That's where our connection with ourself comes in. And, you know, um, I would say that sometimes, Pema Chodron is a wonderful Buddhist teacher, and she talks about get to know the fear. You know, what does it look like? What does it feel like, smell like, taste like? Draw pictures of it, speak to it, work with the fear
Mm.
because that's part of who we are as human beings.
Let it
For
speak to
sure.
you. Otherwise, it becomes a shadow, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Which is
exactly.
a whole nother subject.
Yeah.
Right, right. This is a little turn of conversation, but maybe not. Um, in looking through your vast experience, Carolyn, and your vast writings, I noticed a book that had a title and what appeared to be a theme, and I must admit I haven't read this book, that you wrote in 1996, called Reclaiming the Dark Feminine.
Yeah,
And I was struck by that because of personal interest, first of all, to be
yeah,
honest, but
yeah,
um, I was thinking of this sort of comes before a lot of other things that you've been doing for all these
right.
many decades.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of inner resources, as you were mentioning, and being in touch with that inside of you. And I was wondering, is this dark feminine part of your early story, or do you feel that that is a kind of energy that is involved in this whole entire ordeal that we're going through? I would love to
It's
hear your
a
comments about it.
it's an archetype that every man and woman has. Yeah, it's not just women. Men have their feminine side as well, and um, it's an important it's an important archetype. It's part of the shadow, and it's important for us to make friends with it, to understand it. Um, because if we don't, like other aspects of shadow, if we send it away and we say, "Well, that's not me," then it comes back to bite us in some way. So at the time that I wrote that, I was in Jungian therapy and I was working very diligently on my own dark feminine and the dark feminine of the women around me that I'd grown up with who raised me. Um, and it was important for me to come to terms with that so that I wouldn't then act that out in my life by saying,
Mhm.
oh, that's not me. How
Right,
many
right.
times do we hear this in our culture these days? Oh, that's not who we are. Well, excuse
Mm,
me, that's exactly who we are. That's part of who we are, and we need
mhm.
to make peace with that and do the work on that we need to do so that it can be transformed and it can find its own place in the psyche.
Is this the dark feminine shadow piece? Um, I would love to hear maybe just a couple of attributes of that. And I'm wondering if it's essentially different from the dark masculine and what you might think about that.
Mm. They're pretty close. They're pretty close. If a man has not accepted his feminine, then he will act out the dark feminine, you know, through very masculine behavior. It can be very complicated, but
Yes.
it's behavior that is unkind, sometimes violent, um, opportunist and hurtful to others and to the earth. I mean,
Sure,
um,
sure.
the earth is feminine, and you know, we see what human beings, men and women, are doing to the earth. And that is just very, very hurtful and violent. And what we're doing to the oceans, which are symbolically, archetypally very feminine, and the way that we are polluting the oceans to where,
Hmm.
you know, um, at some point, life will not be able to survive in the oceans, the fish, the sea creatures.
Right,
Um,
right.
and so
Right.
we're all doing that out of our own pain and unconsciousness.
Yes, out of our unconscious. Yes, right. And I think to go back to the initiations you were referring to, I think that is all about coming to a greater consciousness, to claiming your life, as you say, as an adult, and
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, and then moving into your work, into your own
It's all about
particular.
becoming conscious,
Yeah,
so
it's
that
all
you can
about becoming
so
conscious.
that you can become a whole person and then utilize that to serve the world.
I'm wondering if you have any ideas as to what would it look like, let's say, in your mind, if we were collectively? Because it's one thing to go through these rituals or rites of passage individually, but what's missing is the community. And is there anything that you see in a perfect world today that we could be doing to get us
Well,
through these dark times that we're in?
there's a wonderful organization for men called Illumen, Illumen, and they get together from time to time and do a men's rite of passage,
Mm,
even if they've done it before. And it's a very powerful ceremony. I know several guys involved with it. It's peaceful, it's not violent, but it's a very powerful ceremony, always done out in nature, with the support of each other. And then there's an organization I know of called Woman Within, I believe it is, Woman Within. And they do rites of passage with each other. And I'm not sure how they do that. I think it's out in nature as well. But it's, peaceful and not violent and very supportive. I say not violent because some of these groups that think they're evolved, can do things that are very hurtful to other people,
mm.
and can become very cultish and very dangerous. And that's not what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah. The cultish and the gurus and
Yeah,
the bad gurus. I mean, obviously there are enlightened gurus.
yeah.
Um, I just lost my train of thought. I had a question on the tip of my tongue.
It's not a ritual, but it's a gathering of people. I'm thinking of some of these major concerts by well-known people of good heart,
Hmm.
or appear to be of good
Yeah,
heart.
yeah,
I don't know them
yeah, yeah,
personally,
yeah. Yeah.
but they get that kind of collective energy
Hmm.
that has a lot to do. I'm thinking of music in particular, and
Hmm.
songs. Way back in the day, there was a lot of positive, motivational,
Yes,
inspiring
yes.
work that came through music. And I don't know if Taylor Swift is in that, but I know her name is all over the place,
Yeah, yeah.
and and can gather, you
Hmm.
know, now with our technology, like millions and millions of people,
Right, right.
and what that I'm wondering is, as a collective, if that is a way of our connecting now,
I
that
agree.
sense of relationship.
Yeah.
Please, yeah, just say, if you would say a few words
Well,
about
it
that.
just reminds me of the Eleusinian mysteries back in ancient Greece, where people would come together maybe once a year for these big mass gatherings, and they would have, individual little rituals that they would do, but then they would come together in these large groups. And this took place at the very height of the golden age of Greece. When Greece was at its best, this is what people were doing once a year. And it was, because there's something in us that is archetypal that craves this mass connection, you know? So when I see thousands of people going to concerts, it's like, yeah, of course,
Mhm.
we want that mass connection, because something in us remembers when we used to do it and how meaningful it was and can be.
And we're living in times of unprecedented loneliness because of the
Absolutely.
loss of community and connection.
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
can never go back to how it was, but we can bring that into the future with us and
Yes.
incorporate
Yeah.
technologies in a positive manner. and
Absolutely.
not ego-based, like a lot of social media, you know,
Right.
which can be very damaging. But
Yep.
it seems like the tricky part of these rites of passage, whether they're individual or collective, is keeping it focused on the interior spiritual self and not the ego, and
Absolutely.
not looking for some exterior, somebody to come from the sky and save us or whatever, and
That
that's
is the challenge, is to keep it
Mhm.
focused and grounded and really promoting the highest good, promoting our evolution as beings, nature beings with each other.
Yeah, and once the ego has been sort of put, taken down a notch, so to speak, instead of running the show. That's
Mhm.
that's really not a hard thing to focus on, really.
Right, right.
What's best for all of us, for all of humanity. And I think that what we're going through now, this end of an age or edge of an age, these changing times, this is a um, great opportunity for us to evolve spiritually and reconnect with each other. It would
Well,
just be,
I don't see how we can move through it unless we're doing that. And that's
yeah,
what all my writing has been about, is
yeah,
do your emotional and spiritual work.
yes,
Um, because that's the only way you're going to get through this. Now, that's no guarantee you're going to physically survive, but make it your intention to physically survive and do the inner work
mm,
and build, a community around you that supports that inner work.
mm, yeah.
Because if there's any getting through it, that's required.
I'm also wondering, and I'm sure you have spent a lot of time reflecting on sharing this, is how to develop the kind of resilience and the holding of the opposites. And I'm thinking particularly as you talk about grief and joy. Um, how do we do that? How do we do that? What can you share with us around how to move through that?
Well, there's no quick, easy answer because it is a practice. And so, we just have to practice that every day, that there's something we're grieving about. It's not hard to find those, and at the same time, we are experiencing and appreciating the world that we have around us. We're appreciating the inner world and we're also appreciating the outer world. So, in the midst of this sorrow, we must uh, appreciate our lives and appreciate the good things that we are experiencing, and realize that there's a difference between joy and happiness. This is a happiness addicted culture that we live in. And happiness is very circumstantial. If you break down the word happiness, it starts with the syllable hap, which is related to happenstance. It's come and go. It lasts for a minute and then it's gone. Um, Whereas joy is a much deeper experience of positive feeling and positive experiencing. Joy does not necessarily come and go. Um, it lives in our core, and we can feed that joy through gratitude, through daily experiences of appreciation. And then just to know that while happiness comes and goes, joy is always in our core, it's always in our center, and we can draw on it, even if we're sad. Now, that sounds crazy. But even if we're sad, we can draw on that joy that's within, because that joy is not dependent on the external. It's who we are. It's the sacred, the divine within. And we can always appreciate that. Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, he wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote about that joy. And part of joy is meaning. And so, in the midst of that hellish place, he was able to experience meaning and joy. And so, that's a practice. And boy, did he have to practice, as we all do now, as going forward in the world that we're living in.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and Mary Oliver, who we come back to so many times,
Yeah.
she said, "We shake with grief, we shake with joy. What a time these two have, housed as they are in the same body." That's the work right there.
Mhm. To hold all that and to live through that with that, and to share that
Yeah.
in community with other people,
Yep.
and your own particular, each of us, our own particular gifts or abilities that we offer the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the work.
that's the work, right? Right.
Well, Carolyn, we're coming to the end of our time. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to have you on our podcast. And I wanted to give you a chance to just let our listeners know where they can find you and what you might have coming up in the near future for us.
Yes, you can find me at carolynbaker.net. You can email me at carolyn@carolynbaker.net. The website is carolynbaker.net, but I'm also giving you the email address. And I have a daily news digest, which you can learn more about if you go to the website and click on the subscription tab. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
It's been great to
Lovely
be
to
with
be
you.
with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Bye-bye.
wonderful
Bye bye.
Bye.